Hey guys, 50 Stitches still here. I just want to do a quick video, kind of a tutorial, but not really, because there's tons of sharpening tutorials out there. This is more if either you're just getting into knives, or every time you sharpen, you just can't get it to where it's nice and sharp, it's cutting paper, and it's shaving hair for you, which is a good sharpness level to have, because a sharp knife really is a safer knife to work with. You hear a lot of people say that, but the reason being is when you're cutting with a nice sharp knife, you don't have to struggle to rip through material. Usually it just cuts nice and easy through. Whereas if you got a duller knife, you're going to struggle, and then when it finally cuts, you're more likely to cut yourself, cut somebody else. So that's the reason why people say that. But I got a diamond sharpening stone here, which is a good one to start out with. This is a Smith stone. You can get this at Walmart or probably a local sporting goods store. About 20-25 bucks. And this is a great one to learn with, start out with. And I actually still use it today sometimes, but I'll show you the other things I use more of now. I took the tip of my finger off with my serrated edge spider cut there not too long ago. But as I was saying, it's a good one to start with. But as you get, this is really good for pocket knives. You really don't want to be sharpening your big fixed blades or kitchen knives on this thing. The reason for that is, as you can see on, take it out here, it's not too wide. And as you're trying to, when you're sharpening your knife, you could veer to one side or the other, and then you'll wind up with all kinds of different scratches and divots in your knife edge that you don't want. It's going to make it hell to sharpen with. But if you got a nice little folder or a nice little fixed blade like this, start out on the coarse side. Now, a lot of people, before I get to that, make sure you put this in either a vise or one of those clamps that you can clamp to the table. Trust me, it'll save you a big headache when instead of having to hold it straight and do it with one hand, you can have it clipped in there and then use both your hands to get the angle that you want. Also, another good tip about starting your angle here. You want to feel for either your secondary bevel or your primary bevel if it's a 0-degree grind, which means it just goes from this to your edge and there's no secondary bevel. So it just goes straight down instead of coming down and then coming in. That's your 0-degree grind there. But what you want to do is you want to feel for it, move it up and down and you'll feel where it locks in. It kind of just sits there. And that's going to be your angle there. It's really not too important to have perfectly 15 degrees on this side and 15 on this side. It's not that crucial. It could be off a few degrees. You can even have a 25 and a 15 and it'll still cut nice. Just as long as it ain't a real drastic difference. It's going to make it easier to sharpen in the long run too, if it's not that bad. But good technique to do is once you find your edge bevel there, bring your elbows tucked into the sides of your chest. And instead of moving your arms with the knife, you want to rock your body and keep your chest tight, or keep your elbows tight to your chest there. What that does is it keeps your knife nice and level the whole way up and back. I find that when you try to just use your arm movement, what happens when you bring it back towards your chest, the spine of your knife naturally wants to lift up because you're getting closer to your body. The mechanics of your arms are changing, and it's not drastic, but it just kind of lifts up a little bit. But over time, as you keep doing that, you're going to convex your edge. That's good if that's the edge geometry you want. Not so good if you have a Scandi or a flat grind, and or a V grind, and you just want that flat bevel on there. One good thing is you'll hear people say, I can't talk today, chasing the edge. What that means is instead of counting your strokes as you're going up, just go ahead and give it a couple strokes, you know, forward and back as you would. You don't have to keep count of them. After about 30 seconds, 45 to a minute, fill the opposite edge. The opposite edge that was down here, you want to fill this edge here. If you get like a little bit of resistance, it feels like a little hook on there, that's good. That's a burr. That's what you want to do when you're starting out. So make sure you have a nice even hook though, or burr the whole way down here. And once you do that, you know it's okay to start on the other side. Repeat the process until you get a burr on this side. Now you can either, I don't want to confuse you, but you can either give it a couple strokes to bring that burr down depending on how, you know, strong of a grit or weak of a grit you're going to switch to. So I like to run that down there like 4 or 5 strokes, just real easy. Then switch to my fine. And the side that you left the burr on, you're going to start on the different grit that you switched to, the lesser grit. I'm sorry, higher grit number on sandpaper and your stones, but actually less coarse grit. So, and then you'll start the process all over again. You know, do your strokes until you get a burr on this side, flip it over, repeat the process. Now, when you get down to your final grit stage, what you're going to do is when you get your burr on your last edge here, flip it over again and just do light, easy strokes and just keep filling how small it's getting and how small it's getting until you get a real tiny burr on the opposite side. Flip it over, do it again real easy until you get a tiny burr again. And then you want to alternate each stroke. So bring it down, and that's called chasing the edge. And what that'll do, that's what's going to give you your final edge and your sharp edge. I think what a lot of people struggle with is when they start sharpening, they really don't feel the edge or know what they're feeling for. So they'll do, you know, the tutorial videos, they'll watch them on YouTube and do everything just like the guy says, but for some reason they're not getting a sharp knife, and that could definitely be your reason why. You can have your angles perfect, but if you have that burr on one side, it's still going to cut like shit. So, I mean, this could be a headache trying to get it perfect where there's no burr on each side. So next step to start after that is something like this. This is a sharpening steel, and this is mostly used for your thin kitchen knives, and I'll tell you why here in a minute. This doesn't actually remove steel, so it's not actually sharpening your knife. You can't take a dull knife and use this sharpening rod and expect to get a sharp knife. That's not how it works. What this does is when you have those tiny burrs from sharpening there, when you run it down nice and smooth and easy there, it'll knock all your burrs off. It also, if you have a rolled edge and burr are kind of like the same thing. So that's exactly what this thing does. It just knocks them out and straightens them up for you. But this also gives you a toothy edge. Now what a toothy edge is it's kind of like a rough edge. Even though you have a perfect point here, on the sides, you'll get a little bit of almost like a small micro serrated edge. Now what that edge is good for is your sawing motions. Anything you got to saw through to get through, a toothy edge is a really good edge to use, or a serrated knife. That's why steak knives are serrated, because you use that saw motion to cut through your steaks or meat. But this doesn't actually remove steel. So I don't know if you could actually call it a sharpening stone, but there it is. Sharpening steel, I'm sorry. Now we'll talk about what probably most people are frustrated with. Your pocket V-grind sharpeners here. Now, I think why most people get frustrated with sharpening knives and think that they can't do it when they're starting out is because they'll buy something like this and think that they're going to start out with a dull knife and get a razor sharp knife after they use this thing here, which eventually might be able to happen, but it's going to take a really long time using these things. What these kind of sharpeners are made for mostly is tuning up an already sharp knife. These will not also knock your burrs off. These will actually give you a more smooth edge than that sharpening steel. But this is for tuning up an already sharp knife that's just starting to go dull. So I think that's why a lot of people say they can't sharpen knives, because they start out on those and they wonder why they don't work. And I was the same way. I'm guilty of that myself. But they do work. You have to already have a sharpened knife for these to work as good as they can. Next kind of sharpening tool is the Easy Sharp, or Sharpen's Best. I'm sorry, I keep calling this the wrong name. But here's another tool that gets misused and not used correctly, and people get a bad idea or bad impression of them. This also has a tungsten carbide bit on it, but I'll show you a good way to use these things, how they can be helpful to you instead of ruining your blade. Now, the reason why people don't like these also is they really don't come with instructions how to use, except for, put your knife in, pull it through. Well, like I said, most people start out with a really dull knife trying to sharpen it. And this will do that. These carbide tips will do that. But there's a certain way you have to use these so you're not just removing strips of steel off of your knife. And that'll just completely ruin your edge, and it'll frustrate you and take a lot of work to get back to normal use. But so what most people do is put their knife in, put a lot of, they'll pull it through a couple times. This ain't working. So they'll use a lot of pressure and pull that blade through. You hear that grinding? And it just removes big strips of steel off your blade. I'm talking like big curly cues, and that's really bad for your knife. You're removing much more steel than needed. You might get an edge, but it's going to be a really delicate edge, and like I said, it just ruins it. Now, the reason why this works is because tungsten carbide is a lot harder than pretty much any steel out there. It's one of the hardest steels you can get. So anything harder than the other, it's going to grind it, shave it, polish it. But you guys get the idea there. Now, a good way to use this is to set this, instead of using it this way and running your knife through this way, hold it either at an angle or flat on the edge of a table. And then put your knife in this way at an angle. I'm trying to do, sorry. It's hard to do looking through the camera, trying to get that angle. But hold it through this way and just light pressure, just the weight of the knife, pull it through. And you only want to use that to, like I said, knock burrs off, straighten rolls, reprofile it. You should only have to use that on a very dull knife that was sharp, or a knife with a bad roll. That'll fix that for you. I'll talk about this side of, this is also a tungsten carbide piece of metal on there. And it also has another one of those V slots. This is for really bad damage, and this is for tuning up your edge. I never seen a tool like this until recently. Not recently, probably about 4 months ago. But I'm starting to see a lot more others like it. What you do is, instead of running through that V slot, you hold this at the same angle as your edge bevel and just brush. Using very light pressure, and just brush the whole way down. Whole way down to the tip. And you'll do the same thing to the other side. Now, you'll get a little bit of an edge roll, but that's what you want when you want to sharpen it. And do the same thing on the other side. And then after you get done with these passes and you feel like, that's enough. This takes off very little steel too, by the way. This really smooths out that edge. This gives you good edges for either push cuts or just one smooth draw cut. This makes a really sharp blade. You guys should, I I highly suggest picking one of these up. They're cheap, $10, $15, $5. Look them up on YouTube. It's called Sharpen's Best. This guy shows the demonstrations of it, and it works like he says. You just got to get used to it. So after you do your brush strokes, you come back one final time, light pressure, and just one smooth stroke. Same thing on the other side. And that'll put your edge roll straight so you get a nice sharp knife. That works great. This is actually when I first started to get a sharp knife. This is the thing I use, and it worked awesome. This will also work on serrated edges. You do the same technique. Just brush it right over the serrated edge, and it'll get it nice and sharp as well. This is getting to be a long video. One final thing here, the work sharp. If you can't do any of those other processes, or you don't want to spend the money or don't want to take the time to do it. I'm sorry, not spend the money. I can't fucking talk today. But pick one of these work sharps up, and especially the Ken Onion edition. I would not buy the original work sharp. I know it's cheaper, but it doesn't have the variable speed motor here. Also doesn't have these nice wide belts on it. These are high quality, and then you want a wider belt whenever you're sharpening a knife. It just makes it go a lot quicker, a lot smoother, and you'll get better results there. You definitely want an adjustable motor for different steels that you use and different belts. You don't want to have a coarse belt on there, have one speed, and just completely grind all your steel off your knife. But I'm not going to go over how to use this. I just wanted to mention this as another thing to get. Definitely get this over the original. There's just a lot more benefits. And a lot of people don't like the issue of this having springs on it. Well, I also got a solution for that. Get yourself either some Allen keys or a nice little Allen key set like this. I think it's 1/8, yeah. Find your Allen key, and then on the back of your guide here, when you're setting your degrees, these little screws here, if you tighten those, that'll lock these in place so they don't move. So you can set whatever angle you need, and then all you got to do is tighten this down, and these will lock. They won't move at all. So that fixes that issue that a lot of people don't like about the Ken Onion as to the original one. I just wanted to go over for either the new guys or guys that ain't too familiar with the different kind of grinds. These pictures would be like looking at the knife like this. What you got here is your V grind or your skinny grind. This is a really sharp grind. Your Moore knives are like that. There's a couple other bushcraft knives. Really good woodworking knives. They're very sharp. But the problem with these is that edge at the point tends to roll rather easy. But other than that, this is a good grind to start with. Your hollow grind, which kind of concaves in. I really don't like this grind, though this could be a very sharp grind. They're just a pain to sharpen. And they just don't cut certain things well as compared to a V grind or your other grinds. Your next grind is a convex. A very good grind. This is a very stable, strong grind. It could also be a sharp grind depending on how steep your convex edge is. This is kind of like a perfect steep edge, shallow edge here, but it still has that rounded toughness for stability. So this is going to stay sharper longer, and that's more of your long-term use where you're not going to be able to sharpen as often as you would. Then you have your flat grind here. Pretty obvious, as the name says. Your edge is basically flat. It might come out here a little bit, but when you look at it, it's a nice flat side on it, and those cut very well. There's not too many things I don't like about the flat grind. In fact, this is my preferred grind. I usually like a flat grind with a convex secondary bevel here, but you can also get a V grind on it. This is what I was talking about with the secondary bevel. This will be your main grind, and then you'll have a very tiny secondary bevel that comes in, and that's what you're sharpening, is this side here. But these dashes here, I was just showing you can have different grinds on your secondary bevel as well. And then your last one here is your chisel grind. It can have any combination of, the four I was talking about earlier, but on one side, and then on the other, it's completely flat. These are your Emerson knives, and where it gets the name from looks exactly like a chisel. I don't have too many knives like that except for one, and it's a bayonet. So it must do something very well. I don't think it's a very good cutter, but it might pierce well. I'm not sure what the reasoning is behind that. Supposedly it's supposed to be easier to sharpen in the field, but I don't really know about that. And lastly, here to wrap this long video up, I'll give you a few examples of the grinds. This is your flat grind here. As you can see, it's pretty much flat the whole way. You can see a little bit of, comes out a little bit at the end, but not much. This is my preferred grind. It cuts a lot of things very well. Next grind I'll talk about is the hollow grind. This is a cheap knife I picked up from Tractor Supply. Yeah, Tractor Supply for about $5. This is a hollow grind. As you can see, this grind kind of concaves in. Like I said, it can be very sharp, but it's a pain to sharpen, and there's some things it just doesn't cut well, but it can still be a sharp knife. I know it's kind of confusing, but you would know what I'm saying if you used a hollow grind knife. Here is a convex grind. This is one of my favorite fixed blades. CRKT Hitsatsu, very sharp. It was dull. It was very dull when I got it, but this is 440A steel. And even on that work sharp, with the speed of the motor turned up all the way and the coarsest belt, this thing did not want to sharpen. It's a very hard steel. But I don't know if you could pick that up. This is your convex edge. It's not picking them up too well. But that's your convex edge. They come out instead of going in or staying flat. This thing cuts like a beast. So even though if you have, like I said, that's what this edge is. Even if you have that edge, it could still be sharp. But what the main thing it gives you is a very stable edge, so it'll stay sharper longer. There's a Hitsatsu. Here's your chisel grind. This is an AK-47 bayonet that I got when I was overseas in Iraq.